How's that? Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. We're in. Thank you. Had the mic off. Anyway, I was out online today looking for a Bengals mask, and they're out of my price range. So I guess I'll be content with the one I have. It's a good one. It works. But I thought, hey, Anna and Martine, who stopped by to deliver a cake today, they had some pretty cool masks. I thought, hey, I should try finding a Bengals mask, and they're online, but somebody's trying to take advantage of the idea that it's a rare commodity and people might want these for a price. So anyway, we are myth busting again this evening, and a couple of weeks ago we looked at in myth busting. It's looking at things that we see online and they really don't match up with what the Bible says. So the first week it was God's judging this nation with coronavirus. And Second Chronicles 7:14 is the passage that was used. And again, Second Chronicles 7:14 not really saying that. It's one of the most misused passages in all of the Bible. It's taken out of context all of the time. Yes. um, it's taken out of context all the time. And last week we looked at another Mythbuster, and that's the idea Psalm 91. If we just name and claim Psalm 91, then the coronavirus isn't going to touch us. We're not going to have an issue. The pestilence will not touch you, is what that psalm says. And again, not what that psalm is saying. There's really a problem with the whole name it, claim it idea. That idea is not found in the Bible either. But that particular psalm, again, misused with the coronavirus. So, tonight, another Mythbuster. This one's kind of the opposite from last week. Last week is you can have enough faith, and if you have enough faith and you name and you claim Psalm 91, the coronavirus is not going to touch you. And again, Jesus never says that. In fact, Jesus says when we have tragedy come into our lives or we see tragedy, our first response is to repent. That comes from Luke 13. In fact, that's the main response. And it has nothing to do with the sin of anybody going through it. That's what Jesus says in Luke 13. But this week is the opposite, and I've also heard this more than once, seen it on the internet, again, reading the Twitter, reading the Facebook, people saying this. It goes something along the lines of, okay, you're right, Jesus promises that he is going to be with us, whether or not we get the coronavirus or not. And in fact, the worst is no longer with us. So if that's the case, if Jesus is with us regardless of whether or not, then why aren't we meeting together? Why are we still meeting online? Don't we have enough faith in Jesus to either protect us from the coronavirus, or, again, it doesn't matter whether we get it or not, but we're meeting together, we're doing what we've been commanded to do. And a variation of that is we have been commanded to meet. And I'm not going to get into some of what I've heard in just the past week or so along those lines, because there is some strong sentiment there, and even politics are involved. We're not going to go there. But we are going to address this command idea, because the myth busting has to do with Hebrews 10:25 and the command to meet together. And again, so there's two variations of this. One, don't we have enough faith in Jesus that we should just meet, and if we get it, we get it, and if we don't, we don't, but we're meeting together. We're praying together, and we're doing life together. And then the variation of it is, Jesus commanded us to meet together, and we just need to meet together. Those two arguments, and they're using basically the same passage. So there are multiple ways to answer this one, so stick with me. The first one is probably the weakest argument. It's a concept, and we're not even going to deal with the Bible passage here, but it's a concept throughout Proverbs. And it goes along the lines like this. We have brains. We have brains. We're to be wise. We're not to be stupid. We don't let our kids play in traffic. We're not, we're always operating with the information that we have on hand. So God gave us brains, and our brains are telling us it's probably not really good for us to meet right now. I get that. I understand that. It's an okay argument, and again, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes were given wisdom books that back up that idea. The problem with that is there's a limit to that, because there's also other passages. Sometimes the wisdom in the kingdom is not the wisdom of the world. And so, yes, we don't let our kids play in traffic, but there are some things that Christians do that sure look like we would let our kids play in traffic because we are serving Jesus and we're taking the gospel into risky places and doing risky things for the gospel. And again, we use, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes have in their general ideas of wisdom, cost-benefit analysis. We do cost-benefit analysis all of the time. But cost-benefit analysis, we still have to remember as we read the Sermon on the Mount, and again, the Sermon on the Mount is calling us to risk and calling us to do upside-down things that aren't necessarily wisdom in the world's eyes. We do use cost-benefit analysis to get along in life and to further the ministry. But there are limits to it. If somebody, the Sermon on the Mount is telling me if somebody puts a gun to my head for my coat, give him my other coat. Using brains and as a response to this idea that we're breaking commands and we should be meeting anyway. The main and number one reason why that we do this and we don't meet is because we love our neighbors. That's the reason we're not meeting. We are called to love our neighbors. And if our neighbors are concerned about their health, I should be concerned about their health. Loving my neighbor is assuming that I could be a carrier, that I could be the one who is carrying. I'm not so much worried about getting it. I'm worried about my neighbor because I am a potential carrier. We all read the story of the guy in Chicago this week who went to a birthday party, a funeral, and was at the house. And again, in their study, he's hugging people. This is before all of this started, the very outset, the very beginning, before we knew much about all of this. I mean, he hugs family members, and over the course of the next month or so, 3 of them pass away. I don't want to be that guy, and as for other pastors here in the community, I don't think they want to be in that position either. But regardless of that story and regardless of all that, I love my neighbor. And if I love my neighbor, I'm not going to do anything that's going to bring him into harm's way. We don't give them the virus. The other thing, too, is I may have strong faith. I may have confidence that Jesus is going to take care of me whether I get the virus or not, but my neighbor doesn't. And part of my ministry of the gospel is I don't presume on his faith or lack of it. I don't presume on it. I don't make his decision for him. I don't presume on him to ignore all the things and then just do what we're going to do. If the community has decided that we're going to stay indoors, then we as a church body are going to stay indoors because we love our neighbors. We love our neighbors. We don't presume on other people. And here's a biblical principle. I do not have the freedom to step on a broken reed. Somebody with weak faith. Somebody who doesn't understand Jesus, or has not not necessarily understand. I don't understand Jesus, but somebody who is searching and looking and seeking for Jesus in a way that some of the rest of us aren't right now. So I don't have the freedom to step on a weaker conscience. We also, in the ministry of the gospel, this is also quite apparent in the pastoral epistles, we don't give our neighbors reason to distrust us. What we're telling our neighbors, if we decide that we are going to go ahead and meet as the table right now, we're telling our neighbors, we don't care. We don't care about what you think about getting the coronavirus or us being carriers or whatever. We just don't care about you. We're going to meet. That's not love. And we are called to a ministry of the gospel, and we don't put barriers up. We don't give them reason to not trust us. If our neighbor doesn't trust us, are they going to listen to us when we try to give them the gospel, when we try to present to them the gospel, when we try to help them see Jesus and understand Jesus the way we do? I want my neighbor to know the same forgiveness of sins that I do. Is he going to listen to me about forgiveness of sins and the glory of the gospel if he doesn't trust me, and he doesn't trust me because I'm meeting and I don't care about his feelings about meeting and the coronavirus? I truly believe that love for neighbor dominates Paul's ethic. Paul has a lot of ethic. There are lots of imperatives and commands and things that we should be doing, and expectations, and this is how the community is to function, here's how we are to be, but love dominates the ethic. It's all over Paul's theology and Paul's ethic throughout all his letters. And that's supposed to be our default position. Not obedience. Obedience is. But love for neighbor. Jesus said, you will know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. That also extends to the community. So if love is dominating the ethic, then I have to run everything through the grid of love for neighbor. And here's something that's hard for us to hear. Here's something that I learned a long time ago. It's something that's hard for us to hear. And quite frankly, I get it. There's a lot of people that don't accept this. But I truly believe this is in Paul's writing. And that's this. If our neighbor doesn't feel loved, then we really are not loving them. If our neighbor doesn't feel the love from me, then I'm not really loving. See, in our default position, we want to throw that back on them. I've come to think that Paul is putting the onus on us in this whole thing of love. We cannot say we love our neighbors with a straight face and then go meet in a time like this. So love dominates the ethic. Well then, what do we do about the command to meet? And here's, I think, what drives a lot of this, but let's address it. So Hebrews 10, 19 through 25 or so. Yeah, 25. Here's what it says. You gotta hear the whole passage. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have boldness to enter the sanctuary through the blood of Jesus, he has inaugurated for us a new and living way through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, and there's the context for everything that follows, the house of God. Number one, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed in pure water. Number two, let us hold on to the confession of our hope without wavering, since he who promised is faithful. Number three, let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works. There's good works and love, by the way. Let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Now, again, this is long. We're not going to unpack all this. We don't have time. I'm not going to presume on your time either tonight. You probably have already tuned me out, and that's okay. But, the command here isn't quite what people say it is. This is the myth-busting part. The primary command here is not to meet. It's tucked in here, but it's not the primary command. There are three imperatives here, three primary commands. The three primary commands, and this is what the house of God does when they are together. The first is we draw near together. We draw near. That means we gather together to draw near to Jesus. It becomes the Holy of Holies. That's the context here. The church, the gathering. We draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience. There's our baptism. So that's the first thing. We're all drawing near. We're gathering together to be near and with Jesus. Let us. That's the command. So we draw near. We gather together. Number two, let us hold fast unto our confession. That's the second thing that we do. Let's hold on to the confession of our hope without wavering. So we gather together, and one of the things that we do is we hold fast to our confession. Gathering together unites us in the gospel. It reinforces us in the gospel. We are reminded of the gospel. The gospel doesn't go missing in our lives because we're constantly gathering to remind ourselves with it. Let us hold fast to confession. And then the third command is, let us watch out for one another. Let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works. So we gather together as the house of God, verse 21, to draw near, to hold fast our confession, and then to encourage each other in love and good works. We come together to encourage each other for love and good works out there. So mission is a big part of our gathering. We're not just simply gathering for ourselves, we're gathering for Los Fresnos in this instance. Now, tucked in underneath this, that's part of all three of these commands, is not neglecting to gather together. So it's kind of presumed you're going to gather together when you do these three things. The primary command here, I was raised to think this way. The primary command here is not, don't neglect meeting together, because that's not how it reads. That's not how this passage works. The three primary commands are the three let uses. Let us draw near, let us confess, and let us encourage each other. And while you're doing this, don't neglect to meet together. Or it's presuming you're not meeting together. It's a present participle. That's why it's tucked in at the bottom. It's not the primary command. So when somebody says, hey, we're breaking a command if we're not meeting together, yeah, it's part of these commands, but it's not the main one. So if we're going to quote verse 25, we need to quote the first three. Because the first three are the ones that are most important. And that leads me to this. We're also commanded to love our neighbor. And we just heard why doing this is love our neighbor. So I ask, which command's more important? Loving our neighbor or meeting? Which do you pick? Which one is most important? See, I don't think we've always thought of it that way. We want to pick and choose which one we want to be most important, depending on the situation and depending what context we're in. We can't do that. We can't pick and choose. And so we have to be very we have a command to love our neighbors. Not meeting right now is loving our neighbors. Hands down. That is love for neighbors. So it's not, and the other thing too is, we aren't necessarily neglecting to meet. And that's a whole other issue for a whole other day. We're not going to say, I'm already at 21 minutes. We're not going to get to that. I'm already overdue. But we're still meeting. It's not the meeting that we would like, but it's online. Jesus still meets us in His Word. He still accomplishes His purposes, His sacramental purposes, His life-giving purposes in the Word. The life that He gives, the forgiveness that He gives through His Word, still happening online. So the gathering together, still happening, so long as we're gathering and placing ourselves under the Word each week. It's not the meeting that we would prefer. It's not the optimum. And certainly, over time, we need to, we need to meet. But not right now. We're loving our neighbors. Anyway, that was a long one. That was another Mythbuster. Hope you're doing well. I hope you are surviving well, but doing well. I know people are starting to use cabin fever a lot. I get that. I understand that. So I'll be praying for you. You pray for me. Join us here tomorrow, 10:30. We will have our Easter service at the table. This has been another conversation at the table. I hope you're doing well. You have a great Saturday evening.